Thank you for joining me in the garden today. I'm Liz Davey, and this is a walk in the garden filmed by NCTV in my garden here in Norfolk. It's mid-December. We still don't have any snow, but it certainly has gotten colder. We have days that are going up to 50, but today it's only in the 30s. So I think slowly winter is coming. Not much doing outside right now. I do try to take a walk through the gardens each day and see what's happening, and also pick up sticks. If you have trees, you probably have sticks, especially if the trees are getting older. So one of the things that occupies my winter days as I'm out on my walk is to pick up sticks and add them to my burn pile, which is in my vegetable garden. I'm in front of the herb garden, and it's nicely covered with oak leaves. And the oak leaves are nice and fluffy, as you can see, and they mat down, not as much as the maple leaves do. So that makes them a very good mulch because they hold air, and that helps insulate the plants underneath. There are some herbs that can still be picked, but not very many. There's a little sage that could be picked, and if I want to dig through the leaves, I could also get a little thyme. But I've already harvested my herbs for this year and dried most of them or made pesto and frozen it. So I really won't be out here too much until it's time to cut back some of the herbs. I'm noticing I have a plant stake left. I picked up most of them and put them away. Plant label, and also any decorative items have been stored away for the winter. So we're set for winter out here, and we'll be looking forward to spring when our first leaves will probably be the chives, which will come up early in the spring, probably in late March, early April. Now let's head over to the perennial garden and just take a walk through. I've left the bloom stalks on most of my late blooming perennials. These are perennials that are native plants, and the seeds from these flowers as they go to seed are very good for the birds. They've been enjoying them, and also they're somewhat decorative. As you can see in the sunlight, they kind of glow a little bit, and they look really pretty if there's a little light snow on them too. So I've left these up. They will be cut in the spring, and the asters. I have a few perennials in here that aren't as hardy. Those I've mulched with straw. That would be the phlomis that is here. It probably now is hardier because our zone has changed and we're getting warmer winters. When we used to have colder winters, and we still could get a cold snap, the phlomis was kind of semi-hardy. But now that it's been a little warmer, it seems to be doing pretty well, and I may in the future not even need to mulch it. Coming down this way, we have the pods from the butterfly weed, and most of that has gone to seed. I saved some of the seeds, but I'll leave the pods on. And many of these native perennials stalks will contain the hibernating insects or pupa of the butterflies that are resting for the winter, and these beneficial insects will come out next year, and so we want to save those. That's why I left some of the stalks up. I'll wait until it is nice and warm and those things have a chance to actually leave the stalks before I cut them down. Again, the native grasses are still up, and they'll be cut in the spring. Most of the leaves are gone, and again, we have a nice cover of oak leaves on most of the garden. These are foxgloves that are the green that are interspersed through this section of the garden. They went to seed year before last and formed plants last summer, and I'm hoping that we have some nice blooms come May this year. Hopefully they will make it through the winter just fine. I may reinforce the leaf cover on those if we are going to get some very cold weather without snow. Snow would insulate them, so a good cover of snow would be very welcome at this point. I still have autumn joy sedum. I've put some of it into my winter containers, as we'll see a little later, but there's still some here. And some of the other plants The asters are also here, and I've left them again for shelter, also for birds. Birds can get in there and be somewhat sheltered from the winter weather. Coming around this way on chrysanthemums and lavenders, I have put baskets full of the oak leaves, put a rock on top. They made it through the windstorm we had last week, and they're doing just fine. Some plants like Shasta daisies and the early daisies and poppies put up a bit of extra foliage in the fall, and that'll be just fine. It doesn't hurt the plants at all, and they will perform just fine come spring. This foliage may die back if it gets extremely cold. Also, there are grape hyacinths throughout the garden, and they too put up foliage in the fall, which is kind of handy because you know where to plant bulbs and you know where they're going to be. When I planted my tulips this year, I knew where the grape hyacinths were going to be, right in this area and several other areas. Now we're going to head over to the vegetable garden. Most of my vegetable plants have been pulled and added to the compost pile. However, there are a few things left. There's some arugula, and I could probably pick a little bit of it, especially if we get a nice day. It seems to put up some new stalks if we get some weather that's a little less cold. You'll notice the straw and some strings also to mark where I have things planted that I don't want disturbed when it comes time to plow up the garden in the spring. This is parsley, and I can reach under there and get a little parsley out. However, I have picked 2 quarts of parsley that I have in the refrigerator. We're going to use some of that in the kitchen today, and it will come up again in the spring. So I did not remove the parsley because it will give me a spring crop. As it's a biennial, it forms nice plants the first year from seed. The second year it will come up and you can use it, but then it will go to seed and form seed heads. So I plant parsley every year and have some to use almost year-round. The broccoli is gone, and it can be pulled anytime I can get it out, but I can also wait until spring and put it into the burn pile when I'm doing my spring burning. My brush pile is starting to grow. Burning in Norfolk starts the end of January. I usually don't get around to doing any burning until much later than that, usually at least March. Still have kale. Believe it or not, kale is very hardy. We've had some very cold weather already, freezing weather down in the 20s, but the kale's still going, and I can come out and pick some of these small kale shoots anytime to use or preserve, and I have been doing that. We've had some kale salads, added it to soup and other dishes, and it is a great crop. It comes up early in the spring. You can plant it early, and you can have it all the way into winter. I also have straw over the garlic, and I have a whole row of garlic in this area. And again, it will be safe and warm under the straw all winter, and then in the spring it will start to come up through the straw, and the straw just will stay there all season. Again, the string that's over the top of it shows us that it's there and don't disturb it. Over here we have strawberries, and they too have a nice coating of straw so that the leaves don't dry out and become dead. And also raspberries. The raspberries will stay as they are. They will be pruned in the spring, and the prunings are added again to the burn pile. I like to burn both rose and raspberry prunings in the spring. They are kind of nasty to handle and very hard to put in a trash bag or even move it to a brush pile someplace else on the property. So those will get burned as we get into spring. So the garden is pretty well ready for winter. I do keep my fence erected. I have both an inside fence and then an outside electric fence. However, the electric fence is turned off for the winter. It still seems to deter most things. They got used to it being on during the summer. So we haven't had as much deer damage this year. In fact, I've seen very few deer. I guess they have moved on. There was a lot of building down the way from me, and I think that was possibly where they lived. So now that they are evicted from their prior home, they have not been coming down here to eat my garden. So I haven't seen too much deer damage, but that's one of the reasons I walk around each day, to see if anything needs attention and to see if I do have deer or other animal damage anywhere. And if I start to see damage, I will definitely start spraying with the deer spray again to discourage them. I did it in the fall and it does persist a while, but in the spring or later on, if I start to see some damage on some of the bushes, the azaleas, the hollies, I will start using the spray again. Now let's look at some of the decorations I've put up. Flower pots that are either wood or fiberglass or even metal can stay out all winter. Those that are made of terracotta or ceramic need to be put in for the winter in our climate. I like to fill my window boxes and my containers that I leave out with something to look a little more festive in the winter. And these things will stay all winter. And some of the things you can use are red twig dogwood. I have the red twig dogwood in my perennial garden, and it profits greatly by being cut back every year. It grows new shoots, and the new shoots are a brighter red than old shoots are. So cutting it back, you get some nice new young shoots. So I cut it back every year, or sometimes every 2 years if I don't get it done. And then I add it in with some of the greens cuttings. You can prune evergreens now. It's a good time to use some of the prunings if you're pruning them, and use them in fall arrangements. Leucothwae is another one that needs to be pruned annually. I have holly, and the holly berries add a nice touch. Robins this year have not been prevalent. Sometimes the robins eat all of the holly berries before I get a chance to put them in my winter decorations. You can also just use plain sticks, twigs that you find that are interesting, and if you wish you can spray them white or another color to go with your decorations. These are the sedums, the autumn joy sedums, and those too can be sprayed or they can just be left with their russet color. Other things that can go in are various things that you pick that have gone to seed pods. This one is ironweed, and it has, once its seeds fall, leaves nice little floral type flowers and bunches that kind of pick up the light nicely in the garden. So these are alliums that I had, and again the allium blossoms dried, and they can be used in the arrangements as well. And these will actually freeze into the pots, and they'll stay here until spring, and at which time I'll remove them and they'll be added again to the burn pile or the compost, depending on what the content is. I also make baskets for outside and put those. I have one on my front doorstep, and several other containers throughout the garden that I do leave out are filled with the greens. So it accomplishes two things at once. It decorates for the holidays and the winter, and it helps prune the shrubs. Now let's head back by the pond. The pond has a sheen of ice on it, but my ice melter is working. I've got it plugged into what's called a thermal plug, and that ensures that it doesn't work when the temperature is above 32, and that helps save a little electricity, hopefully. And this keeps a hole in the ice. The fish are there. We can't see them. A lot of times they hang out in the flutile that I have at the bottom of the pond. That's kind of their little winter house. And on warmer days, they will be out swimming around. No food for fish until spring, till the temperature is at least 50 degrees in the water. And Right now, of course, it's much colder than that. Although the ice is not real thick, there's just a sheen of ice on the pond at this point. I've made a few decorations that we'll leave up for the winter, for much of the winter. And again, I do check on the fish, make sure that the melter is working properly so that we have a hole in the ice. And I will also shovel off the area if we get a heavy snow. We still have some decorative grasses around, and of course rhododendrons and other plants that stay green all winter give the garden a little structure during the winter rather than just a flat area. Again, I will keep my eye open for deer and deer damage and do some spraying if I see any. And now let's go on up near the house and check out the bird feeders. Most of the patio's been put away for winter, but we do have the bird feeders out. And I have one at the house, and then this one, which holds quite a bit of sunflower seed. Right now, it could use a little more sunflower seed because the squirrels have discovered it, and I'm feeding some very fat squirrels. This one has suet holders, and as the weather gets colder, I will be putting the suet cakes into these side feeders, and they attract the woodpeckers and some of the other birds, the cardinals as well, love the suet, especially when it's colder. This other feeder has some smaller seeds, and the smaller birds like this one very much too. Many birds prefer to be ground feeders, and I just throw some seed out on the patio, and they seem to enjoy that. Again, this year, our bird population is way down. I don't know why. I have to do a little research, do some reading, and see if there's any information on that. We've had some birds, and in the early morning especially, but whether there's a lot of seeds out there for them in native plants and natural seeds, that may be part of it. Whether people have been using a lot of pesticides on their lawns, that too may have decreased the bird population. We do not use any of that stuff here, and hopefully our population of birds will increase. We also had a very wet summer, and that causes a lot of fungal disease, which may have affected the birds' reproductive cycle and keeping their baby birds alive. A good bird book is a fun thing to have for the winter, especially when we get some snow, so you can identify those birds at the feeder and learn a little more about them. Now let's go inside, make a few more decorations, and do some cooking. All right, we're inside now, and it's time for inside gardening. And I have quite a few plants that came inside for the winter. And one of them is, I dug up the amaryllis that spent the winter or the summer outside, and they're still just bulbs because I haven't watered them yet. But it's time to start watering them. I like to wait until, a lot of people like amaryllis at Christmas, but there are so many other decorations in my house at Christmas time. I kind of like these once the decorations have all been taken down and put away. I like to have something in bloom. So I wait to water my amaryllises about Christmas time, and then they start to grow. I received a gift of another one kind, and this is an amaryllis too. And it comes with a wax coating around the large bulb. Some of my amaryllis are small because they're offshoots of originals that I've divided. Others are larger. This is a large one. It's got a wax coating, and you don't have to do anything to it. It's the easiest house plant ever, and you can see it's already growing. And you just put it in a bright, not total sun, but a bright spot, and you will have a large amaryllis in another couple weeks. They grow quite fast. You don't have to water it. You don't have to do anything. Now, I didn't know they recommend that you just throw it away when you're finished, which is the easiest thing. But you can also use a knife and cut off the wax coating and plant the thing and let the foliage that is left after the bloom stalk has been cut grow, and plant it out in the summer and start treating it like the others. And you'll get bloom. It may not bloom every year, but it will bloom again. So you can keep them, excuse me. You can keep the amaryllis for more than just the 1 year, or you can throw it away if you prefer. In addition to watering all my plants, we took some cuttings back in September. I put 3 in each pot. This is a coleus, and I have been pinching the tops of these, the little leaves that are at the top, and this causes them to branch out and make several branches. But it's time now, the pots are full. These have rooted quite well. In fact, there's a few roots sticking through the bottom of the pot. It's time to get out some pots and some potting soil and plant them in individual pots. I'm not going to do that right now, but each of these plants will make 3 plants as we go forward. And these will be ready to fill my containers in the summer. We won't be able to put the coleus out until probably around Memorial Day, but by then they should be fairly good-sized plants. The other thing with indoor gardening is that seed catalogs are starting to come. And I haven't ordered my seeds yet, but I will do so soon. And I advise if you're ordering seeds and want particular varieties, order them now because seeds do run out, and some of the varieties particularly will be in short supply later on in the season. So look at your catalogs. It's a good thing to do between Christmas and New Year's. Just check out the catalogs and order some seeds to plant later on or to start under lights inside. In addition to amaryllis as a winter plant, we have poinsettias, and I have one here. If you want to keep it going, you need to water it. And unfortunately, they usually have the soil fairly high, so they're hard to water, and especially when they're left in this foil container, which looks bright and cheerful, and it does keep them from spilling all over. But the best way to water this is to remove it from the foil container and set it in a bowl of water, a pan or a bowl, foil pan, whatever you happen to have. Just fill that with some water and set it in and let the water absorb through the bottom until the top of the plant is damp. And you need to keep it watered, and it will stay nice and red. Be a good plant throughout the winter and season, and if you can keep it in a cool place, even better. It'll last a little bit longer. I don't save my poinsettias from year to year. Some people do have success with it. It requires a strict regimen of darkness and light in the fall and to get it to bloom again. But some people do this and have good success with it. They put a wastebasket or something over it so that it's in complete darkness during the prescribed hours that it needs the darkness. Now I'm going to make a few holiday decorations, or remake a few. I made this frame to hang in my entryway for fall, but now I'm going to redo it as a winter decoration. And I'd wired these items onto the corners, and I'm going to take them off. And this little guy was the scarecrow. Again, nice and fall, some fall flowers here. I'll probably save the scarecrow to use again. And we're left with the frame. And it has some grapevine on it. I'll leave the grapevine where it is. Maybe tuck in some of the ends that are coming loose, or even cut them off. And then I'll put some winter decorations in place of the others. And I have here a bird and some pine cones, a rope, ribbon bow, and then another little pick with some pine cones and a little sprig of pine and artificial pine and berries. But I've got some real pine, and I'm going to use that for this one. And what I want is some of the arborvitae. And this I found lasts quite a long time outside. So I'm going to cut a couple pieces of that off. And I've got my wire here someplace. Here it is. And I can wire that right to the frame up in this corner. Floral supplies can be purchased at most of the craft stores have them now, and even fabric stores. They'll have a variety of things that can be used. Picks to hold flower stems. And then I have a little bird and some pine cones, and I'll put that up here. And I'm partial to red birds at the winter season. And we'll wire that right on the frame. And that has a little green stem, which I think I'll tuck behind. And then we have the other corner. And again, I'll put some of the arborvitae there. Trimmed off my shrubs. I'll have that go the other way. Wire it first and then around. And then this pick can probably just stick right in this area, into the wired portion. And then the bow was just several pieces of ribbon folded to make a bow. Very easy type of bow to make, and wire and a piece of wire around it to hold it in place. And there we have a frame to hang as a winter decoration at this time. And that can go in my entry. Then I'm going to make a centerpiece, and I have a sled, and I'm working with Oasis. Oasis is these bricks that you can get. It comes in two varieties, a wet one and a dry one. The dry one is called Sahara, and the wet one's called Oasis. Kind of makes sense. And you need to wet this Oasis, and you really need to wet it well if you're using it. Not just a little sprinkle of water, because that won't get all the way through. This is what's going to keep your stems green in the house. And you want to put it in a bucket of water and leave it overnight, and then let it really soak up the moisture. And then when you put your greens in, and I'm going to start doing that, they will stay nice and hydrated. It's really fun to take some of the greens you have in your yard and see what you can do with them. And I follow just a couple rules. One is not to leave a cut stem that you can see. And that would be when you take something off, don't leave a blunt stem. And the other one is if you put your stem into the oasis and then you decide you don't like its location, you need to recut it just a little bit off of it, because going into the oasis seals the stem and it will not take up water. So it's pretty simple, and you can use a variety of greens, which is what I'm going to do with this one. And I have some, that was white pine, and then we have some hemlock, which is a different green. I have a whole bucket full of variety of things here. Pull out. I don't want this too tall because it's going on the middle of my table. But fan out some of the arborvitae. And this is a again, I'll just keep adding a variety of greens. And again, I decided to move it over to the other side, so I cut it off just a tiny bit so that it would take up water over here. And sometimes if there's a lot of needles on the stem, you need to clean them off in order to put the stem into the container. And you can also take off branches. Again, a variety of greens looks good. And you can even use things like Andromeda, or Pieris, and which adds, it's got its buds on it, and that adds some texture. A little more white pine here. And let's see what we have in the basket. Some of the Leucothwae. And again, I'm going to take a few leaves off the base of this so that it goes into the oasis. And now I can start adding, need to take a look at the other side a little bit. I can start adding some other things to the arrangement. For instance, some holly. And again, I do have a little stub there, which I can, but I'll take off some of the leaves at the base and add that. And I have some pods. These were one of the bee balms. And what I did is I spray painted them. And I had a few of those into, and they were dried on the plant. And then I just gave them a little coating of white. And I'm going to leave a spot right there because I have a bird and a nest to put in. Oh, I also want to add some pine cones, perhaps, over in the back. And pine cones can be wired to these sticks. It's just a matter of putting the wire around the pine cone and to fasten it, and then you can push the stick into the oasis. So you have a pine cone there, and then I have a little nest that I can just nest in here with a bird in it. And if you're having trouble moving it, you can also put a pick right through that nest, right into the oasis, and that will hold the bird in. So that's kind of how we make a sled type arrangement for that. And there are other things you can add. You can add some false greens that have been sprayed or have snow-like cover on them. These are not real, but they can mix in with your real things. I also have some artichokes, and these were real artichokes that I sprayed gold, and they can go into an arrangement as well. And Christmas balls, apples, all of these things can be added to an arrangement. Now I'm going to make a little one, and this is a coffee cup, and are we able to move this enough to there? And again, I will be using the greens. This one's going to be just a little arrangement, makes a nice little gift. Again, it has the oasis in it, and it won't leak, but you can water it and keep it damp. You can keep that one damp too. Inside this sled, I did use a food container that, would normally be recycled, and instead I used it to hold the oasis, the damp oasis, so that I can water it, and it won't shed all over and water on the furniture or the table where it's put. And again, mixed greens in this tiny little arrangement. And you want to make sure the oasis gets covered. And again, I'm looking for what I have to put in it. A little of the Pieris again. And put that in one side, and again I have a whole section full of greens and holly. This holly has a dead spot on it, which I need to cut off, but the berries will be left. Add that. And we need a little more height to this one. Again, taking some of the needles off to put some height in, and that's still too high. So I'm going to cut it there. And find another piece that I like. And I have plenty of material here to work with. Again, all trimmings from the yard. You just want to make sure those stems go into the oasis so that it gets some water. Checking to see what it looks like from the front. Needs a little more of this. And we're coming along there, and again we can add some decorative items to that, smaller cones, maybe an apple. I like this one better, I think. There. And then I have also a little bird for this one. Most of these birds have a little clip on them, and you can fasten them to some of the greens. Sometimes a little harder. Easier said than done to get it at the right level. And not having any luck here with this one. I may need to put in something a little stronger to hold that up. Let's see what we have. Perhaps the stem of the leucothoi? And I'm working backwards, I think, on this one. And there we are. And so this is a nice little cup. Again, a good gift, maybe for a teacher or a friend, or even someone that's in a nursing home and or hospital and doesn't have a lot of space for a larger arrangement. They can save the cup and use it later, and they have a nice little arrangement for the holidays. If you've worked with pine cones, fresh pine cones, or picked them up off the lawn even, you've gotten your hands covered with sap if you aren't wearing gloves. And I do that. I can't wear gloves that easily if I'm doing decorating. So I have found that if you use Crisco, and this is just Crisco shortening, or peanut butter works as well, and you just rub that into the sap and then wash your hands with soap and water, and all of the pine pitch will come off of your hands. It's like magic, and it does work wonders at getting it off without using harsh abrasives on your hands. Now let me go and wash my hands, and then I'll meet you in the kitchen. We're in the kitchen to make some holiday things, and I'm going to prepare a little supper for several people, or you could use the items as part of an open house buffet. If I were having an open house buffet, I would add more items probably, but this is a good start of things you can serve. And I'm going to make the first thing I'm going to make is a Stollen, which is a German bread. And this recipe is a particularly easy one. Usually a Stollen is a yeast bread that takes quite a lot of time to prepare. You have several risings and adding the fruits and nuts. This is a quick recipe. It can be found on the King Arthur web page, King Arthur Flour web page. And it's an easy one to make. And it starts out with some flour and 2 1/4 cups and 1/2 cup of granulated sugar and 1 1/2 teaspoons of baking powder and a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And I am making a half a recipe, but I'm giving you the ingredients for a whole recipe. And then we're going to cut in a 1/2 cup of cold butter. And I'm using the food processor simply because it's easier than sitting here and cutting it in by hand with either a fork or a pastry cutter. So you just want some small pieces. But then I'm going to continue the process in a bowl. The butter's been cut in. I do this with a number of pastries. I like being able to gradually add the ingredients in a bowl, but I like the convenience of cutting in the butter with the food processor. The next thing I'm adding is a half a cup of ricotta cheese, and this is the low-fat ricotta cheese. And then we'll add an egg, 1 egg, a teaspoon of vanilla to the ricotta. I'm going to mix that together. And I will add it after I've mixed it in a separate little bowl. I'll add that in to the stollen. This is not a usual ingredient of stollen, but it does make it good, and it keeps it moist for a number of days. The website where I received the recipe said it would stay fresh for 2 weeks. I don't think it'll last that long in my house, so I've never tried it. I'm going to add to our flour mixture the fruits, and I'm adding a cup of mixed fruit. If you like the glacé fruitcake fruit, you can use that. I don't particularly like that type of fruit, so I'm adding some chopped dried apricots and some white raisins, a cup of fruit, and then you want some almonds, and 1/3 of a cup of slivered almonds that have been toasted. And I'm going to coat those with flour with the dry ingredients. And then we'll mix in this ricotta mixture. You may need to add a little cream to this if it is too dry, but I don't think it will be. And we're going to mix that around until all the flour has been moistened. And at this point, I'm going to just turn it out on the counter and finish it by kneading it together. And it will form a shaggy mass here. A little messier than some things, but it will all mix in soon. The recipe makes 2 loaves. Again, I'm making half, so I only have 1. And there we have it all together. And now I'm going to roll it into an oval shape about 7 by 8 inches. And I'm using my rolling pin with the stockinette cover, which rolls it pretty well. And I'm guessing at the size, though if you want to be precise, you can use a ruler. But 7 by 8 is going to be just a little less wide than it is long. Tuck in any fruit bits. I've already heated my oven to 325 degrees, and now I'm going to fold it. A stollen has a specific shape, and it is folded up not quite in half. And I want to get as much dough up as we can. And then I will add it to the parchment paper on the baking sheet. And this will bake for approximately 40 minutes in a 325 oven. And clean up a bit. The next thing I'm going to make is one of our family favorites. It was my sister's. One of the things she makes a lot for gifts, or used to make a lot for gifts, and it's cheese ball. And they're very nice if you're just having some hors d'oeuvres, or if they also can be a gift for someone if they've been wrapped. And I'm going to start with 8 ounces of cream cheese. Again, I'm doing a half recipe at this point, but I'll give you the instructions for a full recipe. It's pretty simple. The next thing that is added is cheese spread. And we always use the Old English that comes in a jar that looks like a juice glass. However, they're very hard to find anymore. So I have found that you can use any type of cheese spread that you find, cheddar cheese spread. And this one has some horseradish in it. It was a horseradish cheese spread. So I left the horseradish out of the recipe. The recipe normally has a teaspoon of horseradish, but since it's already in the cheese, I'm not adding it at this point. I will, however, add, it calls for a wedge of blue cheese. So that's pretty much, how big is a wedge of blue cheese? Again, old recipes tend to be a little vague sometimes, but this one, I think you can add about as much or as little as you want. And I'm just kind of going to crumple this all together and mix it up until everything has been mixed in. Incidentally, these are at room temperature before I started making them. It makes it a lot easier to get things mixed. Again, you could use the food processor if you run out of time to soften things up. But everything just gets mixed in until it's smooth and thoroughly combined. And I'm going to add to that 2 tablespoons of parsley, again from my garden. And a bit of onion salt and garlic powder. Just a bit of each. And I'll mix those in. And then we want to coat it with something. And you can either use mixed nuts or chopped nuts. Chopped walnuts or pecans are good. Or you can use parsley. And I'm going to use parsley that I have cut up. And again, this is from my parsley that I brought in for the winter. And I'm going to just add my cheese. And then roll it in the parsley, which is two pieces here. And at the same time, I'll wrap it in the wax paper or wrap that I was using and put it in the refrigerator to firm up. and then it can be served and garnished. Again, nuts or parsley work well. And into the refrigerator it goes. The next thing I'm going to make is a salad, and this is a crunchy winter salad. The recipe calls it a Christmas crunch salad, and it's based on broccoli. It's very colorful, cauliflower, and I used about twice as much broccoli as cauliflower. And a package of cherry tomatoes which have been halved. We're going to add half a red onion, which has been chopped. And then I'll make a dressing for this salad. And the dressing I'm going to mix in the bowl is half a cup of mayonnaise. Again, this could be doubled easily if you wanted to make some more. A larger salad if you're having an open house type thing. This can be made in advance. A quarter of a cup of sour cream. Get it all over. One tablespoon of sugar, which is a tablespoon of vinegar, and I'm using just a light rice wine vinegar. And a dash of salt, and a few shakes of pepper. I'm going to mix this together, and then I'll put it on the salad and mix that. This can be served then well chilled, and it will keep if you want to make it ahead. It will keep for a day or so. I'm just going to toss the ingredients with it. And it will stay crunchy. And it's kind of colorful for Christmas. Kind of your vegetables and dip all in one bowl. And the last thing I'm going to make, and again, I need to clean up a little, will be Swedish meatballs. And I think every Swedish grandmother probably has a recipe for Swedish meatballs that's her own. But this one I have from an old cookbook, and it's one we like. Most recipes say to cook the meatballs in a frying pan with some fat. However, I have found that cooking meatballs in the microwave is the way to go. It really is fast. It takes about 5 minutes once you've formed your small meatballs, 5 to 6 minutes in the microwave. I'm going to put these in my chafing dish and then make the sauce. There will be some drippings left in the pan, and I will add any drippings that are there. There's not too much in this one. The meatballs that I made include parsley, mashed potatoes, ground beef, and salt and pepper, and some chopped sauteed onions. And I have just a very little of the drippings. So I will add some butter instead. And I probably need to add another tablespoon of butter in order to make the sauce. When you cook the meatballs, put a piece of wax paper over them in the microwave and then check for doneness after about 5 minutes. The meatballs also have egg and a tablespoon of heavy cream as one of the ingredients. And I do need a little more butter because there was not much in the way of drippings. And I'm melting this in the fry pan. To make the sauce that goes on the meatballs. Even a little more. I want about 3 tablespoons of either butter or drippings. And once that's melted, I can add 3 tablespoons of flour. And we'll cook that a bit. The thickening. Then I'm going to add some brown gravy sauce, just a half tablespoon of it, and a 1/4 teaspoon of powdered allspice, which is the seasoning of the meatballs. We'll stir that around, and then I'm going to slowly add a 1.5 cups of heavy cream. I'll cook this until it's slightly thickened, smooth. Sure we have it mixed. Now that the sauce is thickened, started to thicken, I'll pour it over the meatballs. And we're ready to keep those warm over boiling water until they're served. Now I'll meet you in the dining room where we've set up the table for our either small buffet or supper. And so we have some items for either an open house or a very small gathering. You could double all of these recipes to make more if you're having a larger group and add more hors d'oeuvres perhaps. I have a cheese ball. This one I did coat with nuts. Garnished it with a tomato and a little bit of parsley. We have our meatballs, Swedish meatballs, and those will be served and kept warm over a boiling water bath and served over some noodles, which are buttered and sprinkled with a little parsley for some added color. And our winter crunch salad of tomatoes, broccoli, and cauliflower with little onions and a sweet and sour dressing. For dessert, we have some stollen, which is a easy, quick bread to make. And again, you could add other items if you're having a larger crowd. I've placed our centerpiece in the middle of the table with our lovely red bird. And I'm wishing you all a very happy holiday season, whatever you celebrate. And I'll see you next year. I'm Liz Davey. This has been A Walk in the Garden, and I hope you'll join me in the garden again in the spring.